Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. On the pre-show, we were talking about working out, getting ready for the summer season, basically, the Big Ten 10K, and tweaked my hip a little bit, and I thought about doing an ice bath, right? So I wanted to hear if you heard of this on the big show, and if you want to hear the full show, you can go to southboundsports.com and check all our stuff out there. We have a link to the Patreon where you can hear the full live show and watch it on YouTube. But they said that if you take an ice bath after working out, there's basically no benefit. Have you heard that before?
I've heard mixed things with it. I've heard like pre-workout's good, post-workout's good. I think there's enough stuff with fitness right now that any of the recovery things, like you can find the pros and cons to both. Like strength and conditioning, Twitter is like one of the weirdest side avenues you could go on.
Well, let me just tell you, you know how we found that joking coming out for on steroids day thing? So now my internet like thinks that I'm into steroids or something. So I've been getting ads. I must have watched the video too many times. I'm getting ads about becoming a natural bodybuilder, and it's like it must be a targeted thing. I wonder if it's almost like a government campaign, but it will say like you don't need steroids to get bodies like this, and it's guys that are clearly juiced, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't need steroids to look like that random dude that's clearly juiced? Like you would think that they would go back in time to like Steve Reeves or whatever, like a Hercules guy, where he was like not massive, but he's like kind of cut. He wasn't even like ripped, but he's like big and you could tell that he lifts. Like that, to me, that's a natural look. If you're looking like a beefed up Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's not a natural look, dude. And so I have that, but that's where I stumbled upon the ice bath thing because I found a couple studies where they were saying that if you take it before the workout, it'll raise your testosterone naturally. And so I thought, well, normally you would get it like a thing like that, like, hey, you could find out how to raise your testosterone, and then it's like a link to like someone's special essential oil that you rub on your body or something weird that you have to pay for. But this is just a guy saying like, yeah, if you do it before, your body will go into like preservation mode or whatever. And then if you immediately start like working out, I'd assume you'd have to like stretch or whatever, because if you're cold, wouldn't that be higher risk of injury? But going from an extreme cold to then working out supposedly spikes your body's like fight or flight response to where it raises your testosterone higher than if you do it opposite, higher than just working out. And then ice bath is like a mixed thing, because sometimes say it helps with recovery. Some say that it goes into like the same preservation thing. But then you don't really like get out of that. You're kind of just like in that phase longer. So sometimes they say it could hinder your recovery. So I don't know.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because at one point, like the if you have an injury, they say you're supposed to ice whatever the injured area is. But I think from what my understanding is, the better route to go is almost heat at this point, because you want to try to keep like those muscles loose. And if you're icing like areas that are injured, then it's going to cause like those areas to tighten up and stiffen up, and it puts you at more at risk of future injury. Have you heard that?
I've heard, I've noticed a shift, because like when we were kids, everyone always said ice it, right? I feel like that was a thing. They're like, oh yeah, just ice it for like 38 hours. But now I'm hearing a lot more of people say to like rotate between icing it and heat pad to make sure like the circulation kicks back up, which I think would be a better cycle. Because if you're constantly giving it hot and then cold, hot and cold, like there has to be like a response in the body, I would think, compared to just warm. But like on the other side, heat, they say sometimes like dudes that take hot showers supposedly have like lower sperm count to go on the other side of like and I think we talked about having cold showers or whatever too. So I wonder if like just a cold shower in the morning would kick up your testosterone. Because I think Sean Connery did that or something like that. I could be making that up. This is my high tempo, by the way. This is what I do. I get ads for natural bodies and things now. This is my new life. So that's my thing. Do you have anything else you want to hit on? I don't think I have anything else. We'll see. My body's getting into better shape because I don't think I talked about this in the real show. I've been following basically what my watch tells me. It goes into recovery. It'll say like, "Hey, you're fully recovered" or whatever. Try to take a walk. My low aerobic, I think is what it is not very good. Like I usually only do moderate to high. So I need to figure out a way to do low aerobic, but I'm at the point where I'm getting into better shape. So like walking doesn't really trigger that anymore. So it's kind of like pointless. I'm just kind of like moving, without getting into that heart rate range. But I don't really know anything because like if I'm lifting weights, I usually go harder. I mean, I guess if I was like doing like jazzercise or something, maybe I'll have to mess around. Maybe I'll bring out like Ring Fit and see if I can hit that zone. Because that's like a workout game for the Nintendo Switch that you're like not really moving around, but that I feel like would have some type of heart rate raising. Maybe I'll try that and check back in next week.
Well, the one thing I've done more recently in regards to exercising, because I've been trying to get my dog out more when I'm walking him, like, and trying to boost that cardio effort. Because I started just loading up my book bag with my one heavy pack with weights. So like I've slowly been adding that. I haven't. I don't want to go too much higher because I don't want to tear it. But I'm up to almost 60. I think I'm at 60 pounds right now that I have like strapped up with me.
Yeah, it's probably good you have your dog with you because a guy walking around town with a heavy bag is probably suspicious as hell.
And it's at like 5 o'clock in the morning, so I have my headlamp on. I'm not trying to get sprayed by a skunk.
What's in the bag, sir? What's in the bag? Oh man,
it's just weights.
Dump it out. You could be like the next Stetson Bennett, dude. Have your wrist video go viral. Oh, but yeah, you got anything else for high tempo?
No, that's it.
All right, I don't really have much for the NFL. I've been following a lot of the trade. I can't get into the mock drafts at this point anymore. Can you?
The mock drafts frustrate me because I feel like they're trying to sell you like on a group of quarterbacks that there's like we talked last week, there's potential, but I don't know that, like, if you're drafting someone with the top 3 picks, you're drafting a plug and play guy right off the smack. And I just don't think any of those guys are going to come in and immediately move the needle for their franchise. Like there's just that talent isn't available.
See, on the one hand, I used to see it and think like, all right, cool. I can see what Michigan guys are going high. Maybe I'll see what guys that I liked watching in college. Maybe they have a chance to fall to my team, but like this year, it's like, maybe it's just because the Packers have like their, I guess not even controversy, but just because they don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers yet. There's like a cloud over their draft that I just really don't care at this point. Because it's like, all right, where do we go? Get rid of Aaron Rodgers or whatever. But it's almost like, to your point, you bring up the quarterbacks. Every year, it almost seems like this is when they try to see which quarterbacks are like marketable, if that makes sense. Where it's like, hey, let's see which rookies we can like really push out for the number 1 pick. And then after that, it's like, well, maybe if they're good, then we'll be able to market them. But it's like almost their way of saying like, we know this guy's going to probably be pretty good. Let's start marketing him now and then sell a bunch of jerseys from the draft. If they didn't have the mock drafts, I don't think you would have the jersey sales. Because like the first round pick of like, what's a later team, like the Chiefs, it doesn't really matter. But if they get a guy that they had mocked at 15 and he falls all the way to the Chiefs, I feel like that's going to sell a bunch of jerseys for no reason.
Possibly. But, I feel like when New England was in that run, where they were consistently drafting in the back end. They had what I feel like are luxury picks. That it's like you're with the draft picks that they have. They know that the top of the class is there. Like those guys aren't going to be around. So by the time they get to their pick, like the running back from Texas, that Bijan Robinson, like he's a guy that would be available, I think, later in the first round. That would be a luxury pick for a lot of teams because of how poorly rated running backs go, being that you can find value later on. But I think like he's a good player, but I don't know that someone would jump up to grab him. It seems like a lot of the moves that are jumping up are for the quarterbacks, which I think it'll be interesting to see how Green Bay handles their Aaron Rodgers situation, because I think that could be a way that one of the teams addresses it, that if they're like potentially do a draft day trade, maybe a way to say, all right, if we're going to trade Aaron Rodgers, we don't want to be left without a quarterback, so we want X quarterback needs to be picked so that we can complete this trade.
Yeah, that's where it kind of loses me at this point. We're like right in the middle of the offseason or whatever, and we really don't have a direction for some of these teams. And so, like, I really just don't care. Maybe next week we'll find some bigger news, but like the only thing is like speculation. Like, hey, are the Patriots going to trade Mac Jones? And even if that was like a mind-boggling like trade rumor to some people in like New England as one of the headlines from their newspaper, it's like, would it even make a splash? Like if he filled in for Tom Brady at the Bucs, does anyone even care if Mac Jones is a quarterback? It's not like a name that would fill seats, especially with like Lamar Jackson out there. And even like to your point, the rookies, like there's no, and like I've talked about Stetson Bennett, he's not going to be the guy that's like overall number one. I feel like to me that's the winner in this draft, but he's like no Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was like had it all and took like an unknown team, like an LSU team that people didn't expect to go undefeated, really hyped people up. Like Trevor Lawrence is overall like the number one quarterback in that recruiting class, coming in, winning a national championship. That was a pick people were excited about. They don't have that this year. So I don't know. Maybe next week I'll be a little bit more excited. But do you have anything you want to talk about for the NFL?
I mean, that was the big thing, just seeing where they have these quarterbacks going. And I think the big part's just going to be who ends up in those final slots, because I feel like there's now an increased pressure on the top three quarterbacks. So I think there is going to be a little bit of pressure to try to, for the teams that want one of those guys, that they're going to have to package something pretty big to jump up and make that move happen.
And I feel like we haven't seen enough movements to really get an off season that's kind of like exciting. Like we haven't had, other than Tom Brady moving, has there been like a big time quarterback that people were excited about going to a new team? I feel like you had Brett Favre back in the day going to the Jets and then the Vikes, and you have like Tom Brady moving. But like Carson Wentz, like no. Like that's not to me, I knew that was going to be a bust. I talked about it all the time. I hate that guy. So it's like, oh, not a good move for me. Like if Mahomes went somewhere, maybe you could say Matt Stafford going to the Rams, they win the Super Bowl. But this year hasn't had it. Like Aaron Rodgers would be that guy. And I think he has to play this year, because if he retires, he's in the same Hall of Fame class as like Tom Brady. Could you imagine? Hey, here's Tom Brady's accomplishments, and then here's Aaron Rodgers, like basically nothing. I still see people like hyping up Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the NFL. It's like, no, he's not. He hasn't been forever. What are you talking about? He could win the MVP, but doesn't mean you're the best. It was Tom Brady. You could now say it's clearly Mahomes, right? There's no Aaron Rodgers in that discussion. No one's afraid to play Aaron Rodgers. He couldn't even score against the 49ers. I'm still bitter about that in that one playoff. He did nothing in that game. So, the main thing I wanted to hit on this week, XFL. So we have the TV ratings come in, and I'm seeing mixed signals, so I want to give my thoughts on this. We talk a lot about ratings when we get to the college football section of our show. I just want to start off by saying it's a different beast. When we talk about college football ratings, we're talking about the power of conferences, right? You have multiple options. Right now, the XFL is the only option. It's the only football thing on TV. There's no other. If they were up against like the AAF or what's the other one? The USFL right now, then we could kind of do a comparison. But like college football, I feel like the numbers are different. Like you talk about like, oh, well, Michigan's playing so-and-so. The numbers are only 3 million compared to if they play a bigger game, they might pull in 7 million. Should that count negatively against Michigan? It's like, no, Michigan might be bringing in all those numbers. Like when they played Indiana, they only worth like, what's Indiana worth? What's Indiana's highest watched game? Is it Michigan and Ohio State for like 3 million and the rest of their games are like 100,000 something? Yeah, they're not bringing in the eyeballs. No one cares. They can easily be cut. I saw a lot of Purdue people talking trash on Maryland and stuff, and it's like, Purdue, you bring nothing. I want to put together a list of like Big Ten teams' accomplishments and like their ratings because I think that they stink. And everyone knows that it's the big dogs that run the conference. And yeah, you need teams to beat up on. The XFL, maybe I'm coming in a little hot because DC finally lost on a missed field goal. Did you see that field goal?
Yeah.
Fell short. Kind of. It was kind of off to the left. I don't even know if it would have made it, though. But I thought, like, even in college, unless you're a fan of Ohio State, you expect your kicker to make the kick, right? Because it'd be devastating to have him shank it to go to the title game. Am I right? I know people listen to this for the Big Ten. We have had a ton of downloads lately, so hopefully I'm not offending you, new listeners. Or maybe you come here just to get mad at me. I don't know. But the XFL right now, they're about 350,000. And it's their lowest in like the entire season. But again, we talk about it being on ESPN and FX. It's not on the major network anymore. And so if you look at their comparison for like even the ESPN2, all the games that are on there, including college hockey, which I talk about being a good filler, XFL comes out on top. I think they were 371,000. The NCAA hockey tournament was 358,000, 100,000. And then like the NIT was like 370. So it was in between both was the NIT. It doesn't say what game in the NIT. I don't think, is the NIT over? Was that the championship game? I don't know. I wish they had a little bit more detail because I feel like they could. I can guess and say that the hockey one was most likely Michigan versus Penn State or most likely Minnesota versus, I don't even remember who they played. But Michigan and Penn State went to overtime, so I'm thinking that that was the game that went the highest, right? So XFL, you're winning, but you were saying like for the FX one, do people even know that it's on FX?
I had to look to see it on FX. Like, I thought it was like Fox, but like the FX channel that they were broadcasting the games on was like what you would associate like the movie channel for. So it was like, as I was looking for, like, I had to like direct search for XFL, and then again, like, I would never, like, just casually flipping through channels would not have thought that would have been the channel that they were using for it. And I know that they have them broadcast on some of the random channels.
And I was wondering, when did the XFL come back? Because, no, what was the original comeback season? It wasn't 2023.
It was 20 during the pandemic.
Was it 2020?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was wondering if it was around the time when Disney bought Fox, and then Fox kind of went under. And I also wonder, was it Bally Sports now that's in the process of going under?
Yeah.
So I wonder if they already had a deal in place. They realized a lot of regional sports channels were going off, and they said, well, we already bought it. Let's just put it on FX and see what happens. That almost feels like what happened, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what else would make them think like, oh, yeah, let's go ahead and put that on there. Because the other thing would be, I'm trying to think. Yeah, maybe it would be like the NCAA tournament where you have TNT, TBS. What's the other one? True TV? Because like True TV, you would never think like, oh, is there sports on? But the beauty of that is if you're strolling through CBS, they have all the other games up there. With XFL not playing at the same time, it's not the same. Someone said, I did see a comment on like a thread of people complaining on Twitter, and I thought, good, it's not only me. And their response was, download the XFL app, and it tells you exactly where to watch the games. And I thought, well, that kind of is a good solution for them. But the fact that they have to have that, and they can't just like have it front and center on their website is an issue to me. Because like, how many people are going to download the app? Probably diehard fans. I didn't. I think I downloaded it the first year. Have you downloaded it?
No.
And my issue with their website right now is you go to it, and it's a blog. Like even our podcast thing has, you can listen to like the podcast right at the top. They do have a podcast thing to listen to as their week in review, but the very first thing on their page should be the games of the week, the scores. Like ESPN, you go to ESPN, what's the very first thing at the top of the page? The scores. You go to Fox Sports, it's the same thing. CBS, same thing. So XFL doesn't do a good job of like telling you what it is. I'm not going to want to read about highlights or post-game press conferences, right? Those aren't like things that I should be putting on here. I have to click on schedule, and then it automatically takes me down to the current week. But to me, that's like too much. The standings are on here because we're on week 8. We only have 2 weeks left. And so, what are the game days? We're on Saturday, Sunday this week. I want to see, because it's hard to keep the ratings going because you're up against the Final Four, right? In college basketball. And you're up against one of the most watched women's basketball games of all time on Sunday. And so it's like, all right, how did you expect to compete? And if the numbers dipped a little bit, that's actually not too bad, right? Because the Sunday game was legit up against that basketball game. I think it was around the same time. The Saturday night games were, I think the DC one was on during the NCAA tournament games. And then there was a Friday night game for some reason. I missed that one because I'm thinking, who the hell would expect them to play on Friday? Right? Because that's my only beef. I don't care about the ratings if they're going up and down. They do have a game on ABC this week. I want to see how that one does. It's on Sunday. It's Houston. It's San Antonio. It's at 3. People can watch it. The other games are on ESPN. I've seen people say that this is kind of a rumor, so I don't know how true this is, but I've seen people say that ESPN has seen a bump in ESPN Plus subscriptions because it's easier to watch things like the XFL on it, which would make sense. But then I'm thinking, is this like a PR puff piece? How would they know that people are just buying it for XFL? How many people are just, having ESPN Plus because it's part of like their Hulu Disney Plus bundle and have never watched it?
Yeah.
And then have like, oh, I can watch... they sign into Hulu, and then it shows you like the ESPN Plus games, I think, on there now. And so you can say, oh, crap, there's football, and I'll just watch that instead of some random rerun of American Pickers or whatever the hell's on that YouTube or the Hulu or whatever,
Yeah.
So that's my thing. I don't know if using ESPN Plus as a selling point for the XFL. I've said I do like having all the games on ESPN Plus. I like the fact that they've been doing the mirror of ESPN2 because they didn't do that before. Like the NCAA hockey tournament in the past, if it was on ESPN2, ESPN Plus, I would never have been able to watch that Michigan Penn State game. I would have had to like get a cable subscription or like find someone else, go somewhere to watch it, like the bar or something. But like here, I like having the ESPN Plus, and I'm wondering if they're just going to go to the one channel. I guess they really can't with football. Because with football, you kind of need both channels to do other, like, where else are you going to show Indiana playing Purdue? if you don't have ESPN too. I mean, Iowa lived on that channel. So, Beth Mowens, baby. That's a shout out, people. You'll know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's my thing for the XFL. I feel like I have some clear improvements. I just don't know if the league has anything in place to like get feedback. And it's weird, right? You go to their site, you don't see any like surveys or like, hey, we know you signed up for DC Defender emails and stuff, like updates. I barely get anything. And it's not like they're asking me like, hey, what do you want to see next year? Because I could give them some good feedback. It's almost like they're just wrapping it up. And is there going to be another year? I feel like they finish, they sell the merch, and I could see The Rock just selling it to someone else.
I don't know. I think we saw the interview a couple weeks ago where they were like, the big thing is we want to show that we have the ability to make it through an entire season. And I thought, yeah, as a viable league, like you should be able to make it an entire season. And I think they had the pandemic not cut in, I think they would have been able to finish the reboot season as well.
Oh, they 100% would have. That was like a weird thing all over. And I almost wonder if there wasn't the political pressure, if they would have finished it anyway. Because they talk about like having gambling be a good aspect of their thing. So the one thing that I'm wondering here is that Disney has paid for 5 years of XFL broadcast rights from 2023 through, what would it be, 28, 27, 28, depending on when they started it. But I don't know if it counted with the other year. But from like right now, would that be enough to like cause them to go under? Because like if they don't broadcast it, I don't think ESPN can like not pay. But like, can The Rock just like collect that money and not do it? You know?
I mean, I'm sure he could do whatever he wants.
Because I'm sure that they're paying like around over $100 million. They said between 100 and 150 million. But like, is that, I don't know what it takes to produce a top show. Is that enough for them to have the highest ESPN2 rights? You know, that's where it comes down to like, everyone's talking about, hey, the ACC is the best broadcasted sports. And this will be my segue into the NCAA stuff. But like, why would they give Florida State and Clemson randomly more money for no reason? They wouldn't, and they don't have to. And that's the beauty of having like NIT basketball and other rights that they pay really cheap for. They're not going to pay. Like they're paying what the equivalent, they're paying the XFL less than what they pay like the ACC, but it's kind of comparative just because of how many teams there are, you know? I mean, I guess for the entire league or whatever, they get 4 games. The ACC, they get like how many more? But per game, I wonder how much that would pay out. If the ACC and college football rights keep going up, I could see them wanting to have spring football around for cheap. Especially if the other pro sports leagues get their heads out of their ass and they start focusing on allowing streaming for all of their games and let people just buy their package. Because I think that, to me, that's the easier thing. Like the XFL package, I'm not going to pay for YouTube TV just to get the XFL package, or the NFL package, I mean. But if they give me like the NFL package for like whatever it is, $50 to watch the Packers, like, yeah, that might be something cool. Like you have to pay for like the year, that's it. Is that really much more than streaming? But if it's going to be like, what was it used to be, like $300? It's like, no, not worth it at all.
Yeah.
Because you're going to block out how many games. And the games are, now they're doing the other thing with the NFL where they're doing a 2-week flex for Thursday night. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Where you can get told that you're going to play Thursday night like a week or two before the game. So you don't even know what this Thursday night schedule is going to be. Which gets rid of all those crappy games. Right?
And I think that also hurts from the perspective of are you trying to have it, or are you caring more about the in the stadium experience? Because I felt like that was more of a direction that they were going at first, where it was like, we want it to be more fan friendly. Like there was discussion about like bringing the big beer snake back in the stadium and like trying to do all this stuff to like make it a better experience for fans to come out to games. And to me, that kind of justified, if I'm going, like, if we're going to focus all of our attention and social media exposure on the in-game experience and like the stadium experience, well, then it makes sense of why like they're giving this nonchalant attitude with what channels their games are being broadcast on. But now it looks like they're starting to shift direction a little bit.
Well, that's where, just looking at this, they are getting stadiums with like 30,000 people in it. And to me, that should be enough to pay for most of like your on-site people and even like your player salaries, I would think, right? I don't know how cheap tickets are, but I'm assuming they're enough to like really put it in there. If college programs can like just survive with even less than that, right? Like some of the smaller schools. And I know they get like student subsidies or whatever, but like just having schools that have even less than that for whatever can compete. If you're getting 38,000, that's more than a lot of like any NBA and NHL stadium. That's Major League Baseball territory. So I think if they're getting that many in person, that also helps, even if the TV lags. And I think that the rivalries hurt. To me, that's it. You don't have the rivalries. We watch a college basketball, and they talk about, hey, this rivalry and that rivalry, and like UConn, are they really like a legit big-time team now? And it's like, hey, XFL, like, what is your team? Like, what's the hate here? Like, you have DC out on an island by themselves. You really passed up an opportunity to have someone near them. And why? Because you wanted a team in Las Vegas? Seattle? They have so many teams on an island that it doesn't make sense. Yeah, they have 3 teams in Texas and 2 in Florida. Great. And I told you they should group them by geography. Put one in DC, put one in Baltimore or Philly or New York or something. Like, I mean, that's not even that close. But it's close enough where, like, what's traditional DC rivals? Philly? Because of the Eagles and Redskins, right?
I would say, yeah.
So, like, maybe, put a team there.
And maybe that's the route to go. Mirrored off of NFL rivalry so that they're still that natural dislike for each other. Because,
like, St. Louis is there, and that's great they lost their team. What would have been their rival? Because they were kind of on an island by themselves anyway in the NFC West, weren't they? They were with San Francisco, the Niners, and Arizona. So, like, to put a team there, yeah, it's great, and yeah, they're getting great attendance because there's no other professional team there. But where is their rival supposed to be? Put 2 in Texas, do whatever 2 cities you want. I don't think they should have a Las Vegas team. Do like maybe Las Vegas is in LA, but to me that's not really a rival. Just put 2 teams in LA. That's what they want to do anyway. But they know people won't go to the game. So why even have a team out there? It feels like the West is always like, here, we're going to throw you a bone and give you a West Coast team. And there you go. But like, what kind of rival is going to be that? I wonder if they have like an XFL attendance just so I could see. Because like DC is supposed to be my team. That's why I bring it up. And so I wonder like, all right, how many people actually go to that game? Because DC, for me to drive there would be a pain in the ass, right? So like here we have, I guess, so the St. Louis ones are getting like 30,000. All the other ones are like around 10, 7, 6, 11, 12, 12, 6, 7. So they're basically like college basketball numbers, probably, right? If that, for some of them, depending on which college basketball team, because some teams don't get like any, but they're around like what a Duke UNC I think would get. Duke Stadium's kind of small. So like the average has dipped from 15,000 when they started week 1 to only 9,000 in person. And so like it seems like it's propped up when St. Louis has a home game. So if St. Louis is going to give you that many people, find another St. Louis, right? I feel like next year any city should be on the table to be cut. I don't care about the history. If people aren't coming, cut the city. Like Orlando's, looking at this, is like one of the lowest. So is Las Vegas. Of course. No one's going to go to Las Vegas and go to an XFL game. Are you insane? I could have told you that.
Maybe they will.
They haven't been. That's the lowest. Las Vegas and Orlando. Cut both of them. Hell, put a team in Georgia and put a team at Clemson or somewhere. You know, like where there's actual rivalries and football fans. Like where are 100,000 people coming to watch football for college? Maybe put a team around there. Did they have any of the teams around there? Maybe the one in Texas. I don't know if anyone's close to Austin. The Los Angeles, LA doesn't have 100,000 seat. It's all in the South or in the Midwest. They don't have any teams there. Like put a team in Detroit and put a team in Columbus. That's a natural rivalry. Everyone hates Michigan and Ohio hate each other.
There you go.
Put it there. Put one in Boston and New York. Hate each other already. Cleveland and Pittsburgh, if you want another alternative. That's even close enough they could drive to the game. I mean, would it matter if it's regional?
I don't know.
They wouldn't be on TV because there's no LA team. But they don't have one in Chicago. They could just do New York, Chicago, LA, and then did the rivalry cities that I mentioned. Because you could pick one. You could pick Cleveland and Michigan and Pittsburgh and Chicago and have that be one 14 pod. Because then you would hit basically all the Big Ten rivalries right there. Right? Then do LA and New York and then pick two teams in the South, two cities in the South that have like SEC rivalries, right? Like a Georgia and a Tennessee. Or what's the league that does Birmingham? Like do Alabama and Georgia.
UAB.
And then what's the difference if they're all spread out? Like who cares for that other division, you know? Like Dallas is in the NL East or the NFC East. But anything else you got for the XFL or football?
No.
The last thing I want to talk about, and I don't know how long I'll go on this, the NCAA basketball tournament. We've been talking about TV ratings, so hopefully this show isn't boring. It's going to be Easter weekend anyway. People are listening to this. You can listen to your family, but you need to break it up with some sports talk. Download the show. Tell your friends about it. Thanks to you for all the up support we've had. It's been like a blast getting our numbers cranked up again. But I watched basketball. It's the offseason, right? And I'm hearing about Clark from Iowa and how women's game is like starting to open up, you know? And I thought, well, I haven't watched any of their games. I didn't think they'd beat South Carolina because my traditional outlook is women's basketball, the same teams can win it every single year. Why? Because there's only so many tall like women's basketball players, right?
You mean you can't just pluck that 6'5" power forward?
You can put Brittany Griner in, and everyone knows she's going to win a national championship, right? So whatever team gets Brittany Griner, or the equivalent this year, is most likely going to have a deep run. Iowa didn't have that. They had 5 short girls out there jacking up threes like they're Steph Curry.
The Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, because like Golden State kind of turned everything on their head, because the NBA was kind of the same, where you put like a Shaq down low, and you have these dudes fighting for rebounds, but when Golden State is there, Draymond Green's not that tall, so they had guys down low and realized that if you're just shooting threes from far range, the rebounds are most likely going to bounce further, so you don't need guys underneath, And it kind of opened it up, and it made teams with big centers harder for them to compete with Golden State, and they went on their dynasty run. Now it's kind of like shifted the team, and I wondered if Iowa was going to be able to do that. Everyone kept saying Iowa was favored. They shouldn't have been. LSU only had 2 losses on the year. Iowa had 6. Iowa was a true underdog story.
But that was one of those teams that like they just got hot at the right time.
Well, everyone was hyping them up. If you're shooting and you're making them, great. But the beef I have is that the officiating was so bad, and everyone's talked about it. If you look up anything, it's nothing against the 2 teams or whatever. The officiating, I don't understand it. I don't know how you can say, hey, watch our women's basketball. This is it. It's finally competition's heated up. You have 2 schools, LSU and Iowa, that have never won the national championship. Even though LSU proved that you can just pay for a coach. They took Baylor's coach that had Brittany Griner, paid for her, brought in a bunch of transfers, and basically paid for their national championship. And in a stunning move, she dressed like Elton John out there. Did you see that? It's like, how much attention could the coach want? If Brian Kelly comes out this year dressed like that, I don't know how anyone could casually cheer for LSU. So I watched that and I'm like, Miami's getting investigated because they're buying basketball players. LSU is doing the same exact thing. Are they going to get investigated?
No,
they're not. And to even have, because there's like rumors about the officiating, there's no official conference ties. But I guess a couple of the officials, or if all of them, had primarily done like SEC games going into the national championship. And to me, that's such an oversight. It's like that guy in the Michigan-Ohio State game that was like a Michigan or an Ohio State fan growing up in the game 2016 that like Michigan got robbed. And there's a picture of him slapping Ohio State's running back on the ass before the game. Like, how is that guy even officiating? The Big Ten should have been embarrassed to put that out. And I feel like the NCAA should have been embarrassed to put on that performance because the game could have been close. And someone wrote up the sequence, and I sent it to you just so I could read it on the show. So, like, in the third quarter, Iowa cuts the lead to 7. They're starting to heat up with their shooting, right? Next possession, a foul called on them. They call a technical on Iowa's best player, Clark. They called it for a delay of game because she touched the ball or something. I didn't really get a clear thing. I don't listen too much with the announcers. So to me, I didn't see anything on the replay that was a technical. It's just ticky-tack bullshit stuff. That put both of their players with 7 minutes left. Or wait, it doesn't say how many minutes are left, but it was early in the third, I thought, where Iowa had 3 players at that point and with 4 fouls. LSU got 4 free throws and they got the ball back. So they made the game like an 11-point lead or whatever, and they get the ball to go up like 13 or something, and the game was over. And because like you can't take their best players and put them on the bench in the third when they're already undersized. And the NCAA had a chance to, hey, why don't you just let the 2 teams play? Right? You're hyping it up. LSU is probably going to win no matter what. This is my thing. What game was I talking about this for college football? It's like, or the Michigan TCU game at the end, whenever they didn't call that penalty or whatever. And they were like, well, you never know. And it's like, TCU was probably going to win. Why would you go ahead and put that asterisk there and give them a thing like, why didn't Michigan get another play or 2? You know? Like, let them throw the Hail Mary and miss it. Iowa, let them just shoot the 3 ball. Why call the off-the-ball penalty for no reason and give their best player the technical when they were starting to heat up? Could they have stayed hot? Maybe. Most likely no. Right? They're already down by 10. Because I thought if they cut it to 10 in the third and they cut it to 7, I thought they have a chance. Keep it close going in the fourth. LSU looked tired. That was my main thing. LSU looked like they were dogged because Iowa was launching these threes and like just getting the rebound because I guess that's their style, right? I don't know. But yeah. You give LSU life and then it's over because then they can put in their backups. And LSU had a lot of like freak bank in 3-pointers that I thought, like, this looks like it's LSU's night. So even if they don't call the fouls on Iowa, the game's closer. You're not going to beat a team banking in threes. You're just not. Like, that's just luck, whatever, for that night. So I don't understand it. I watched the game last night, the men's basketball thing. It was the same thing. UConn's on fire. Why are they calling off-the-ball penalties on San Diego State for no reason? Do they want people to say, this is boring, why am I watching this?
Just to get them in check.
Like, do they want to make sure that it's a 10-point win instead of like a close 3-4 point win? Because that's basically what they did in both games. They said, well, the games are getting close. Let's call a couple penalties and put this game back out of reach. And it was eerie that both of them were officiated the same exact way. And like I said, the way they called the off-the-ball penalties, it was like the penalties were kind of close, I thought, on both sides, but it was like the flow penalties that they killed it. And someone said that same crew did an LSU game against Maryland, maybe it was Maryland playing someone, and the fouls were like way off the ball against Maryland. They had like double the fouls called on them. So like, if you're officiating a game and you're going to do it, and to me, normally I make fun of the Big Ten's like officiating. They get the teams weird in the season, you know. But for here, it's like you're doing it on purpose if you're calling off the ball stuff, but you're not doing it on the other team. Like, I think it was LSU jumped over the back on one of the Iowa players, and I thought, like, where's it over the back? Like, it's a clear over the back. Just call it. Instead, you called it out of bounds, and I thought, this game's over. Like, they're not calling it fair. Everyone saw it. It was like a big thing. It's everywhere. And so if you didn't watch the game, you don't really understand, like, how every time Iowa would make a run, there'd be a phantom penalty, but it wouldn't go the other way. And then, of course, when you're fouling at the end of the game, the fouls kind of like even up. Anyway, but San Diego State faced the same thing. And I thought, like, turn off both games, you know? Why not just turn them off? And I think even the early ratings, they said, like, oh, the LSU-Iowa game had, like, the highest TV ratings of all time. But from the peak, they lost, like, 4 million people. It's like, yeah, people tuned out. You lost 4 million people from your peak because they tuned in, saw that Iowa's guy or girl got fouled out, and that was it, basically. It reminded me of like Trey Burke in Michigan when they played Louisville in the national championship in 2013. Trey Burke inexplicably gets a bunch of fouls called on him and loses Michigan the game. And I always wonder, like, why did they call them? And there's that one penalty where he blocks a shot, which would have turned the game, and instead gives Louisville 2 free throws and basically fouls him out and ends the game right there with a couple minutes left. And so I watched the same thing happen to Iowa, and it's like, does the Big Ten have to start speaking up? I don't know why it always happens to Big Ten teams. I don't know if it's just because, I mean, clearly Louisville was a 1 seed that year. They were the more talented team. Maybe the officials look at that, but Clark is supposed to be the best player. Trey Burke won Player of the Year in college basketball. You would think they would get some leniency, right? They would never, like, if LeBron James came into college, like at Ohio State, and he came in and was like, yeah, I'm LeBron James, and they fouled him out in the national championship game. Could you imagine how pissed people would be? That's basically what they did with Clark. They were like, hey, you're the David, LSU's the Goliath. Like, literally on the court, they were twice as big as them. And, hey, Iowa, you're getting too close, David. Let's just cut you down. Make sure you know your place. Try again next year. Like, if I'm Iowa, is there tampering with transfers? I would be saying, if I'm Clark, I'm saying, like, yo, come play with Iowa. We're going to beat everyone and the refs next year.
Or maybe you just this was a subtle jab in this battle between Fox and ESPN, because you had your Big Ten SEC matchup and SEC pulls away with the win.
And that could be the CBS or the UConn one's on CBS, and it's like, why? San Diego State, that could have been their coming out party. And like I said, in both cases, I don't think San Diego State wins. I don't think Iowa wins. Why have the officials make it so clear? As someone was talking about it during the game, I saw a thing where they were saying like it's almost like the officials know that they bet the line, and they know that like UConn has to win by a certain amount to like make it so they win their bet. Because you call like a couple off the ball penalties, like, nah, son, we got to go ahead and take this back. And it's like everyone talking about how great UConn is, how they beat everyone by like double digits. It's like, yeah, awesome. But it wasn't like they were on fire.
Like they're playing Uno cards. Penalty, penalty, reverse, penalty, penalty.
That's what drives me nuts. People make fun of football, and they're like, yeah, any official can call holding on any play and switch the game. Yeah, they can. And there's been times like where the officials kind of clearly dictate the outcome in a very close matchup. But sometimes, like when there's just pure power, like Michigan playing at Ohio State last year, nothing they could have done would have stopped Donovan Edwards from running for 80-yard touchdowns, right? They're just crushing them. So it's like, all right, well, thanks, officials, you guys can sit down in this one. But like when the game's close, then you're always like wondering. And then with basketball, it's like, nah, they can just call off the ball penalties for no reason, and that's it. You can't do anything about it. It just gives the other team the ball, and you're just one possession short. It'd be like in football if there was a penalty to like give the other team the ball. And they're like, Tom Brady's coming in, he's going to drive his team for the win. It's like, no, penalty. Yeah, sorry, Tom. The Giants get to keep the ball. And I was like, what the hell? The Giants Eli Manning gets to win the game? That's what basketball. That's what it seemed like watching college basketball this week. And I thought, how many people watched this and said, I wasted my time? Because the numbers dictate, like, you can gamble so much, but if it feels like you're picking against a house, why would you keep gambling college basketball? People with fantasy football, I think fantasy football is so popular, and it kind of takes that element out. Because, like, you can bet on one dude. In college basketball, people aren't really betting on one dude, right?
Maybe that's the route to go. Just start betting on women's basketball.
You just bet on... Well, you could clearly make a killing. Pick the bigger team. Like, there's no way LSU should have been the underdog. They kept talking about the entire game. I don't know what the line was, but I thought there's no way. LSU's way better. Like, look at they're clearly a better team. They have less losses. They paid for their team. They bought Kim Mulkey. Maybe maybe Michigan should do that, right? Buy the coach that wins the games and then win a couple national championships and become a basketball school.
Well, there you go.
UConn's the only school in men's that kind of has 3 different championships with 3 different coaches. And it's like, all right, that's a different beast. Michigan could have had like something like that. They had with Steve Fisher. They won with the Fab Five. If Beeline could have won a national championship or 2, and then Juwan Howard would have came in and won, then you could say like, okay, yeah, you have multiple coaches winning. But like, okay, what about Duke? You have one legendary coach. To me, that's very Penn State-esque, right? Joe Paterno, Coach K. Both schools won the championships with one guy. Now that they're gone, Penn State's kept it at a high level, right? I keep hearing about how this is the year for them. This could be my final bell. I keep hearing about how this is the year for Penn State. And it's like Ohio State fans are even saying like, yeah, Penn State's probably going to beat us this year. And I'm like, when has Ohio State even been afraid of Penn State? Like, are they so shell-shocked over the last 2 years that they're like chalking up an L to Penn State? When Penn State has a bunch of unknowns on their team, I think. Like, I don't think any team with a freshman quarterback coming in or sophomore, whatever he is now, but a quarterback that hasn't started, how many teams have gotten that much hype, right? Other than like an Alabama or like Trevor Lawrence coming in, right?
Yeah, those are few and far between.
So, like, I hear, it kind of shocks me and it makes me want to say, like, all right, what the heck is going on whenever you're coming in and you have, I guess he's like the number 1 quarterback. But then they said that he's the number 1 quarterback, Drew Allar, in like 2022. He's not. He was QB4. And so the Clemson guy, Klubnik, was for Klubnik. How do you say that guy's name?
Klubnik.
Yeah, he was the number 1. And that's why Clemson fans were calling for Cade to start last year. Drew might be great, but he's not the number one QB in the class. He's like ranked 32. That's like kind of like the guy Michigan just got committed. Awesome. 5-star guy. Killer, right? But it's not like he's Trevor Lawrence. So to me, when I'm seeing things like that, and same with like college basketball is a little bit different. Because UConn, what did I say last week? I think they have 4 or 5 guys that were in the top 50. San Diego State had like none. So if you're betting on that game, you're betting on San Diego State. What was the article I sent you? Because last week I talked about how they were just keeping guys because COVID year. The article from like their newspaper said San Diego State taking advantage of the COVID senior, they were calling them. The COVID senior, because they knew that that's basically how they were winning. Keeping guys around longer than they should have been versus a team loaded with top 50 talent. Even though I think 2 of them were freshmen. We looked at it last week. I'm not looking at it again. But that in basketball, you can do that. College women's, you can like put a team together around Clark. Hell, if LSU is like, yeah, we're going to pay for Clark to come to LSU next year, and you're her, what do? State Iowa?
Actively recruit.
Because like, why? If any other school, like if Miami's already buying other girls to transfer there. If they bought Clark, and you're like Iowa, could you be mad at that? I don't know anything about her. Maybe she grew up an Iowa fan, but I'm gonna look that up because I feel like that would be common knowledge if people knew that. No, I don't see anything like that. Just about her crying after the game and bringing people happiness. But to me, that's the one thing. Like, hey, if you can buy a player, you can buy them in basketball. Football, it's a lot harder. Kim Mulkey coming to LSU, I think that's how you say her last name, is the same as, did we say this on the show? Jimbo Fisher going to A&M. It's A&M buys him a recruiting class, and they win 8 games or whatever the hell they did, right? LSU did it and won the Natty.
And I think that was the intention. We're just going to solve this problem by throwing money at it.
Yeah, everyone knows that's the intention. And LSU brought Brian Kelly in. It's not like they settled and brought in like some up-and-coming guy. Like, nothing against Florida State. They bring in Mike Norvell. I'm sure he wasn't their number one choice, right? They probably would have liked to get Bob Stoops in there. I know I would have liked to see that. But LSU, they're like, nah, we're going to get our guy. A&M's like, we're going to get our guy. And now they could be regretting it. I don't know. In football, it's a lot harder to get worked out. If LSU goes to the playoffs this year, or A&M should have been there already, right? But I can't really knock them.
Doorstep a couple times.
I mean, it took Michigan a while to break through. When you're playing like the top team, one of the top teams in the country, it's hard to break through, I think. Like, they still have to beat Bama. Michigan had to beat Ohio State. It's like, all right, if they were in like the West, someone was saying, oh man, imagine if they would have kept Michigan in the Big Ten West. It's like, would much have changed? Like, realistically, Michigan still had to beat Ohio State to get to win the Big Ten anyway. The Big Ten championship was a formality. Did they have more division trophies since Harbaugh's been there? Yeah. Would those have mattered? No. Right? What do you think?
No, I would agree with you there. Like, I don't think that shifting it that way changes anything.
Because I hear people saying, like, oh, wait till the SEC does pods or whatever. A&M is going to be much better because they can just outspend the other teams or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you still like what going to be in a pod with Texas probably. They could outspend you at any time. So
yeah, and I don't even like. I think it's about fit too. Like, just because you can afford, and I think that's one of the issues that you're seeing with the A&M experiment is like, yes, you have in the NIL era, you can afford to bring in as many guys that you think are going to be top tier players, but if you can't match their talent to your scheme, then you just have a bunch of like highly ranked players from the ESPN recruiting services.
And then they're going to transfer out. Do you have anything for the final bell you want to talk about?
No, just we have that uptick in viewership and just appreciate people going to the page and checking stuff out.
The one other thing that I wanted to mention, since we're kind of on topic, and I know you sent it to me, was like the Mike Gundy thing, where he said about transfers, why don't you just have incoming recruits sign a contract? And I almost wondered why they didn't do this to begin with, because I was thinking the same thing. When I played college baseball, you signed a 1-year deal, right? At the end of the year, they could kind of just cut the deal.
And I think the way Gundy was talking about it makes so much more sense, because you have this now where if you want to throw more money at a guy, you can say, I'm willing to pay this out over 4 years, but you're going to sign it and lock it in. Or if you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to gamble on myself, I only want – now you're going to – it gives the players more power, and I think it also helps from the aspect of the – You've heard core stories of coaches that do the shady moves where it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring you in, and then magically they don't have a scholarship the following year because it's not necessarily guaranteed. And I think like that kind of restricts the coaches from doing it, because they don't want to either over pick, or like they're trying to keep their somewhat management of the roster. And I think it gives the players an opportunity to be fair too, to know, you know, if I really want to lock into this top tier program and the NIL money's there, like it may be in my better interest to sign for 2 or 3 years as opposed to be a one and done, because if I sign a 1 year, I get this X amount of money. That's not to say that I'm going to be around next year.
And it's the same thing with coaching changes, because that's kind of why I dropped out of college baseball. Played, coach got fired, bring in a new coach. It's like, hey, I'm bringing in my own guys, blah, blah, you fight for a spot, might move you around. And it's like, do I need to go through kind of like that freshman phase again? Because I had other opportunities. I played in a band at the time. We were making much more money. I mean, you can see the guitars behind me each week on the show if you're watching the live stream. But it's like, all right, I have other opportunities. I really don't need to be, you know, breaking in anymore, you know? And I wonder how many other guys have that with like, if you're looking at going pro, I had no delusions of me like, I'm still going to go chance to go pro, you know? I was like, nah, son, I'm done. I got something else I got to do instead. So it's like, what are you going to do for me? And I wonder if some of the recruits now, they're doing that. And it's like, hey, what are you going to do for me? The new coach is like, well, like Deion Sanders comes in, I'm going to bring in my own guys. Where are you going to go? It's like, all right, well, I'm going to go. Nebraska called me. I'm just going to go to Nebraska. They got a new coach, Matt Rule. He wants me to come over there. Right? Yeah. So I think Gundy's thing his proposal had that, where you sign a 4-year deal, even if a new coach comes in, it's kind of like honored. But if the new coach comes in, you can break it, right? Because it's not your fault that they got a new coach in. And so, like, how many people are going to come in and, like, dog it? I'm sure the new coach will just make their life hell to try to get them to quit, you know? But, like, if you're a senior and you're like, hey, I have 1 more year in my contract, I want to make sure I get my scholarship, I'm just not in it. I'm just going to be hanging out. If we win, great, I'll collect my ring, and that's it. I'm sure you have guys doing that, because like not everyone's going to want to go pro. And you need guys like that are just locker room dudes, hanging out, keeping it real, pushing people to work in the weight room and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All right. Yeah, like Matt said, big jump in downloads again. We've got NFL draft coming up. If there's anything you want to hit, let me know. I'm trying to keep it around like an hour in the off season, so I think we were good this week. I wasn't sure, because like it's hard to find topics. We're just riffing. So please let us know if there's anything you want us to hit on, and we will see you next week.